Hi there, in this video I'm going to go through how I made this second house kick. Now I've got quite a bit more processing in this house kick than I had in the first one, and it is quite different than the first one. So let me first play it and then I'll go through every single step I took to get this sound. First I'm just going to solo it and create a little loop around it and push play. All right, now this house kick has a lot of oomph, it has quite a sharp transient, and overall, I really like it. I actually use this combination of kick for a lot of my tracks, and I will show you that a little bit later on in this course as I'm going through some of my tracks and the kicks that I've made for those tracks. So let's begin by looking at kick 2. So once again, we're not starting at a really high frequency, but I have layered a noise sample to give it a little bit more of a transient. So here's the noise sample by itself. And it's just producing, enough high frequency content to make this kick a little bit more present. Now I'm keeping the frequency around the low mid range for quite a while. This is going to allow me to generate a much thicker and punchier kick because this is where you get all that oomph from the speakers between around 100 and 300 hertz. Now I'm then going quite quickly into my sub fundamental, and I think there's been a slight mistake here made by me. You can actually pick whatever sub frequency you want, but I would keep the sub the same towards the whole duration at the end because that's what's going to determine the key of your kick, as I've already taught you in one of the previous videos. So let's look at the amp envelope. Again, soft attack, bypassing the transient. Now, of course, I do have a transient from the click, and I am leaving space here for the click to come through, and then sustaining quite evenly around here and decaying after around 270 milliseconds. So this is quite a short kick, and I would use this for a track where the bass is very prominent and sustained as well. Now, if we look at the click as well, you'll see that the click is generating the transient and I've got it mixed into the track. I've also inverted the phase, probably because I thought it sounded better with the phase being inverted when combined with the original kick drum. And that's really the only reason why I've inverted the phase over there. Now, let's look at all of the processing. First of all, I have an effects rack over here. Now I have the radiator plugin, but I've turned this off because in the end I didn't want too much saturation being applied to this kick. But what I do have is an emulation of the 1176 compressor, adding its own style of saturation. And I'm going to play it now, toggle it on and off so you can hear exactly what it's doing. There you go. So the 1176 is a classic compressor, and it's actually known for a very unique style of kind of gritty saturation that it can add. Now, even though it doesn't look it, any of you who know how this compressor works, it's one of the only compressors I've ever come across where the fastest attack and release time is all the way to the right versus all the way to the left. And if you give me a moment, I'm actually going to prove that to you by going into the manual. So here you go, I'm on the manual and you can see under the release section, 1 is the slowest, that's a 1 second release time, and 7 is the fastest with a 50 millisecond release time. And of course, it's exactly the same for the attack. Now back to here, ratio on all is kind of turning it into a limiter that's similar to having an infinite to 1 ratio. And when combining these settings together, and inputting enough signal to get the compressor to activate, you get this really harmonic but gritty style distortion added to your sound. Have a listen once more. Awesome. Then I've got my classic API EQ, which I love using, but this time I'm using it to soften the really high frequencies and boost around 5K because I know that's where my transient sits. Again, dip at 240 because I know for a fact from my years of experience that around 150 to 300 you can get some boxiness if there's too much energy there. So I'm just dipping around 240 With this EQ, it's quite wide bandwidths or Q reference factors, which basically means that if I boost around 240, it's going to boost quite a wide range of frequencies around that frequency. And that's perfect for me to reduce that boxiness. Then I've actually got a transient master, which is a transient designer, and I'm just dipping the attack again, just sort of softening the transient ever so slightly with this plugin. And finally, I have another transient designer. This one is by iZotope, and this one is a multi-band transient designer. So on the high frequencies, I'm dipping by 3, and this is just softening the attack a little bit in the same way that a compressor would. And on the normal low frequencies, I'm not changing anything whatsoever. So I'm just affecting the really high frequencies and softening them up. When it comes to house kicks, one thing that I really don't like is when they're too sharp. They're supposed to have a lot of oomph, so that's a lot of sort of low mid-range energy. They're supposed to have a nice, audible, sub-fundamental frequency. They're supposed to have a transient, of course, but I don't think it sounds too great when the transient is too sharp. And this goes back to the way that normal bass drums are made. Normal bass drums, when you push down with your foot, and then the hammer hits the skin, the hammer is usually made out of fairly soft material. So it doesn't produce a really sharp transient. And I like emulating that in my electronic kick drums, and that's what I'm doing over here. All right, I hope you've learned something from this video. Feel free to copy this exact structure and get a kick that sounds the same, but I do advise you try and edit it a little bit to make it unique to yourself, and of course always listen to your kick in context with the rest of your instruments in your track, because you'll almost always need to make small adjustments to really make it sit well. So thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.